Now welcome to another news from Naboo with Thor's Lightning Takes. And let's get right to the news.
Okay, first story today. Tony Gilroy breaks down Andor Season 1. This story is coming from StarWars.com. They did an in-depth interview, kind of going over some of the details from Season 1 of Andor. I mean, this Star Wars show isn't like anything we've seen before. Even from that opening with Cassian kind of sulking around in the rain, heading to a brothel, accidentally killing an officer, then deliberately killing an officer, we knew this was going to be a new chapter for Star Wars, to say the least. Andor was a gamble for Star Wars, for Disney. It doubled down on this grounded tone that Rogue One carried, taking the galaxy into a more real-world, messy kind of feeling place than we've ever seen.
Ambiguous kind of thing at times, yeah.
But for Tony Gilroy, deviating from what Star Wars typically is never gave him a second thought. He says, "I don't worry about that at all. I worry about the storytelling. I worry about the logic behind it. I worry about the plotting. I worry about the characters. I worry about the story making sense and tying things together."
You can tell.
Those things were done very well, yes.
I've said it probably 100 times at this point, like the logistics, right? Everything makes sense. It doesn't just happen because it happens. It's not just there because it needs to be there. It makes sense.
And that was done to the T. Everything does make a lot of sense. Things felt grounded.
Yeah, it felt like one thing leads to another, not, oh, there's a MacGuffin we have to go after, we get it, and then we go after the next MacGuffin. Not that I could name a movie that does that, Rise of Skywalker.
Well, it seems to have worked out, as Andor, despite not having the viewership yet that it honestly deserves, it proves that it resonates with critics and fans alike. Critics have been praising it, fans have been praising it. I mean, there's no mention of Jedi, thankfully. I think that actually really helped this story.
I don't want to say thankfully. I think that's
I'm going to say thankfully. It was kind of a nice break.
Well, sure, but
from having the, oh, look, you have a lightsaber, there's our hero.
No, I agree and disagree. I know what you're trying to say. I don't think thankfully is the right way to put it. It's never bad to have Jedi and stuff. It's never bad to have a story like that. But sometimes it's nice to have one that doesn't involve that, if that makes sense.
But for any D&D players, it's like walking around with a lawful good paladin all the time. This show needs to be more gray, and a Jedi, most of the time, is a lot less gray. Things are black and white with them a lot.
I like the way you put it. Yeah, it's having that character in your group who you know is always going to, ruin your fun.
All right, but with the no Jedi thing, Lucasfilm and Disney were actually okay with this. Gilroy says, "I think that everyone was kind of aware of, their side of that there was not only an opportunity, but a need for a new lane. If there's a billion beings in the galaxy, surely there's a billion stories there. They don't all have to do with lightsabers and Jedi and Luke and Darth Vader. I mean, other people are living their lives, and there are incredible events that are happening."
Well, he's absolutely right. I mean, even here on Earth, where we don't have the Force and Jedi, there are people who can do pretty incredible things, right? And so it stands to reason that in a galaxy that only has a tiny fraction of the people are probably Force sensitive, and even less are the extent of being a Jedi. Of course, there's going to be people who stand up and do great things, and it's nice for them to get their story.
Right, to get the recognition that the small people who made up the beginning of the rebellion really did.
As I've said before, we know Luke's going to come in, and he's going to be a hero of the rebellion, and he's going to be a Jedi, and that's great. That's an awesome story, but there are other stories that lead to that. And that's what I feel Andor and Rogue One is. It's the story that allows Luke to come in and lead the rebellion to victory, if you will.
A large part of what Gilroy was doing was defining what the rebellion looks like, as well as what was the cost involved. I mean, the three principal heroes of the series, Cassian, Luthen Rael, and Mon Mothma, you see that their cost is great, or it has potential to be even greater still. Andor suffers in numerous ways we saw throughout the series. Luthen, we know from his beautiful speech, he sacrifices a lot of his morality.
Yeah, his soul, as we've said before.
And Mon Mothma is making an impossible choice involving her daughter.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying how, Luke is the, let's say, spiritual leader of the rebellion, but Mon Mothma is the leader of the rebellion, and she is giving up a lot to get to that point where we will see her in, Return of the Jedi, making her famous little speech about some Bothans.
What Gilroy says these are regular, real people, and this cascade of events beyond their control is coming after them. If the title hadn't been used before, you could almost call the show The Winds of War. It's coming. everything's coming, and these events are just rolling over everybody. How people make decisions and watching them make decisions, that matter is drama.
That could have been a great name for the show. The
Could
Winds of War. Unfortunately, yes. Taken.
It's true. Watching these people struggle and make these decisions is part of what makes the show so compelling.
Yes, because it's character driven, right? As I was kind of saying before, it's not about, oh, there's something we have to go get. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen at all, but it's not just about like, oh, there's the thing, let's go get the thing, we got the thing, let's get the next thing. It's characters making decisions that have impacts on other characters who must make decisions based on what other characters have. You know, you can see the dominoes. You can see one character do something that affects other characters. That's what makes a really compelling story, in my opinion, at least.
Next, I decided to talk about B2EMO, the Andor family droid, and who is charmingly fussy and insecure. I mean, he's obviously an old droid. He's getting up there in years.
Yeah.
He needs to charge up in order to lie and speaks with a stutter, and fans love him. And I love him too. Tony Gilroy says the idea was that it was a dog, an older dog.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Veteran Star Wars puppeteer Dave Chapman operated B2.
Cool.
I mean, if you know Dave Chapman, he puppeteered Yoda, even alongside the famous Frank Oz.
Yep.
He was Lady Proxima in Solo. He also, I think, was Rio Durant in Solo. He also was BB-8. He was one of the BB-8 operators.
Yeah.
Yes. But what else is interesting is he didn't just puppeteer, he was the voice actor for B2.
Curious, that I didn't know.
Right.
Marva. No, I shouldn't have played B2.
No. The plan was always to cast an actor and re-record the droid's dialogue, but things changed, according to Gilroy. I mean, while they're filming, they would just have the puppeteer would recite lines, and they get recorded over later by the actual actor for the role. But Gilroy says, I remember having a list of audition pieces and watching a bunch of them. My brother John was over there one day, and he goes, I'm not hearing anything in here I like as much as Dave. He goes, this guy's really good. And we went back and were like, man, let's just keep him. And so that's his voice. And that was a great phone call to make, to call him up and go, it's yours. You're going to be the voice of this thing. According to Gilroy, Chapman, accustomed to having his voice removed, was overwhelmed.
Well deserved, yeah. It's cool. You never get the credit. And so it's kind of cool that they now get to add the voice to that living being they help bring to life.
Yeah, and he essentially became the droid.
Exactly,
he did the movements for it, and he's also the voice. And,
I think that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, that's especially awesome because they're like, yeah, he probably wasn't really rehearsing and practicing these lines, but they're hearing his voice and they're like, this fits.
Yeah,
this is it. One of the hallmarks of the gritty Andor approach, in the sense of realism, is a certain messiness. They say not in the storytelling, but in the action. In one of the series' early set pieces, Cassian and Luthen, who barely know each other, are in that shootout against the Pre-Mor agents in the warehouse. But they wanted to emphasize that it's not really just the blaster fire they're looking out for. It's the environment. There's the series of chains and pulleys littering the floor that you could trip over, that could slam into people who get too close. The machinery they're hooked up to, lifting in the air, crashing down. I mean, it kept the fight interesting because it wasn't just here's a blaster fire battle. It was all of the environmentals that played such a big part, and they wanted that kind of hook to every fight sequence. Everything has its own unique element.
Yeah. I mean, everything has an environment around it that you have to be, aware of.
And it's a messy situation, too, because those things are unpredictable.
As we saw in that particular fight, too. There was potential to be killed by the chains falling and swinging around.
There's nothing to say that the security agents couldn't have shot the ones that were near them.
True.
Even on accident. Gilroy is also quick to point out another major sequence that illustrates that messiness concept. When Cassian is, of course, locked away in the prison and then leads his revolt after they find out the inmates are never going to be released, the prisoners have to climb up out of the rooms they're in. And that's not easy for everyone. Gilroy draws attention to, he says, in the prison, for me, the key to that sequence is when the kid jumps up on the railing and it breaks from his weight. He says that's a little bit of reality that messes up that air. That's the hook to get people involved. And it's true. I mean, when that breaks, you're like, oh, this is actually going to be a lot harder than it looks. You're not just climbing up and everyone's going to escape real easy. I mean, things can break. Things aren't going to go according to plan. There's that messy realism, that chaotic element.
I mean, the escape with Nemec, right? That didn't exactly go to plan. Mm-hmm. Nemec got crushed by credits.
Like all things in the Empire, the Imperial prison was especially nasty with the fact that the inmates had to walk around barefoot on electrified floors. I mean, it's that unsettling detail you can appreciate on a storytelling level, but it also illustrates the Empire's menacing use of fear and force. I mean, they can instantly take out hundreds of people at a time.
As they did at one point, yeah.
Behind the scenes, Gilroy and his collaborators worked hard to come up with that unique concept to a prison. He said, that came out in the first writer's room with Danny Gilroy and Beau Willimon. It came out in those conversations because we knew we were doing a prison. We were trying to figure out what's a different prison. And they spent a couple of days just on that. Once the concept emerged, the team became totally energized. The moment that idea hit the air, everyone was all over. So then it was, oh my god, so if the floor's like that, what does that do? Well, the guards would have to have boots. They would need these rubber boots. And then at one point, in an early iteration, boots became the whole thing, getting the boots to get out. And as we know, in the end, they changed that and decided to short out the floors, probably because there would never be enough boots for everybody.
There's only like 9 guards per floor. There's not enough boots for everybody. But no, again, it shows you the logistics. It shows you that they think about how things work and why things work and how people would respond to these things. It's so well thought out. I just love the world building of the show.
Interestingly, StarWars.com asked if Kino Loy made the jump.
Did he? Yeah, did he? We all got to know. How does he go out?
Gilroy says, I love him so much, I don't know the answer.
He knows the answer.
But will we ever find out? Gilroy says, maybe we will.
He's either in season 2 or there's going to be a Marvel. There's going to be a Marvel comic. They won't let it. I mean, and in a way, we've talked about it before. They almost should. It's almost this fitting end to not know exactly what happened to him.
I mean, with the amazing successful sequence and the much love for the whole prison episodes, there's one aspect of the electrified prison that Gilroy isn't so sure was a good idea. He said, it's terrifying to think that someone may build a prison based on our design. That's what we were worried about.
I hope not.
But
yeah,
you start to think, is this efficient?
I wonder how often that happens where, reality copies fiction and something of this nature. I mean, we've seen, like Star Trek is a good example of, cell phones. Not that that's exactly what led to the birth of cell phones, but, they have Star communicators.
Trek, cell phones.
But you know what I'm saying. Like, how often do you try to mimic fiction? And hopefully it's usually done for good.
Talking about the Ferrix funeral and rebellion, the very end of the season, we had that powerful procession. Marva yelling out for fighting the Empire. For the procession, Gilroy was adamant that the on-screen actors, not professional musicians, play the music on real instruments, and that it would all be recorded on set.
Yeah, I think that works. That works better, right? Than having professionals later on make it sound perfect. You don't want it to sound perfect, do you?
No. I mean, knowing how important the sequence would be, he collaborated with, of course, the composer, Nicholas Britell, on that funeral music 2 years before the series even started shooting, eventually creating the 7-minute piece. Britell says, this is the piece of their ancient traditions. This is a piece that's not just about Marva or Cassian, it's about these people, and this is a tradition that all of them would know, and that for them, it would be something that hopefully felt like it was a part of their folk tradition and meant something to them. It was a precursor to them all coming together. Gilroy adds, the funeral came alive to me through that civic procession, and it really helped me advance the personality of Ferrix and the depth of it. The fact that these people really cared for each other. The music in turn inspired Marva's monologue, which became a call to arms that enriched everything.
Yeah, yet another classic Star Wars speech given in this series. So many of them.
So many. The last thing he talks about is that one of our proudest things in the show is when Diego is listening back to Nemec's manifesto. He opens the manifesto that night before the funeral, and Nemec is in the manifesto saying, we're going to win because oppression is unnatural, and freedom is a natural thing. And he has a whole big speech about how acts of rebellion are springing up across the galaxy. All the people are out there trying to make a rebellion, and they're all atomized and spread apart. And so the show is really about watching this thing coalesce, and in the end, we will coalesce into Yavin. The consequences of that are good and bad for the people who've contributed the most to making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, the question of what happens to Ferrix after this is a scary one.
It is a frightening question indeed. I can't imagine things go well for the people of Ferrix.
No, there might be a mining accident on a planet that doesn't have mining operations, quote unquote. I mean, let's be honest, they're going to retaliate against them, right?
They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
All right. And on that happy note, we'll move on to new this week in Star Wars, etc. It's kind of a quiet week this week. Suppose that makes sense. We're heading for the holidays, I guess. Tonight, World of Warcraft Dragonflight launches.
Yay!
Wednesday, we have Thor's birthday.
Oh, boo.
The first 2 episodes of Willow on Disney
Yay.
Plus. And for comics, Darth Vader number 29. That's literally it for the whole week. It's a quiet week.
Yes.
I miss Andor already.
We all do. 2 years probably before we get to more.
Nope, but apparently on the 1st, which I think is Thursday, there's some overseas Comic-Con-y type thing, and there's supposed to be some announcements for The Mandalorian there.
Oh.
Maybe we'll get a date. Who knows? I don't expect much from it because I feel like that's a more worldwide release kind of information.
Yeah.
Instead of this smaller-esque kind of con. But we'll see. If there's anything good, we'll let you know.
We have the Video Game Awards in a little over a week as well.
December 8th,
should have, hopefully has, Jedi Fallen Survivor, as some of us call it. But anyway, that is all we got for you this time. So do take to the comments below. Tell us what you think of any and all of today's news, what Tony Gilroy had to say, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.